This is the interview with Julius Rather. On June 8th of 2015, we are in his law offices at Denny Morgan Rather and Gilbert on West Short Street in Lexington, Kentucky. And the interviewer is Franklin Runge. So, thank you for taking time to be with me today. I just wanted to start with some questions about you.
Okay.
And sort of where you grew up and what your family was like, and then your decision to go into the legal profession.
Okay, I was born in Scottsville, Kentucky, Allen County. My father was a county school superintendent. My mother was a teacher. From the time I was in the fourth grade, I knew I would be a lawyer. I don't know why. My whole educational career was directed toward getting into law school, graduating from law school, becoming a lawyer. My mother and father were the first people to get college degrees in our family. We were a long line of tenant farmers. And 1950, we moved to Bowling Green. We moved from Scottsville, about 1,000 people, to Bowling Green with about 11,000. Went to college high school at a teacher training school, College High, and then went to Western. Back then, you could get into law school with 90 hours. I only went to Western 2.5 years. I was in the Army 6 months. And I got into law school with 90.5 hours.
Was there an application process? Do you remember?
No, I just came up and talked to Dean Matthews. And I always remember the tuition in 1957 was $87.50 a semester. I can't remember what the books were, but it was under $50. And the money that I entered law school was borrowed. My father had died in 57. And actually I worked a couple of years for Dorothy Salmon in the law library. And worked 1 year as supervising the club they had next to Lafferty, the educational dining room there. Lived upstairs. I don't know if that building's still there or not. I don't know if Lafferty Hall's still there. Is it there?
I'm not aware of the faculty hall still being there. I think that is...
It was used to be a home.
Yeah.
Is Lafferty still up around?
I do not believe that the Lafferty building is still standing, no.
Oh, okay. Well, I worked my way through law school. They didn't want you working, but I always had at least 2 jobs. One of the best was a houseboy for a sorority, which fed me. And I graduated in 1960, became a law clerk for the old Court of Appeals, and After a year there, I became legal assistant to Governor Burt T. Combs. And stayed on for a short period of time with Governor Edward Breathitt. And then Governor Combs and I came to Lexington and practiced law for 4 years until he took a position on the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And practiced with Ed Denny. Ed Denny had run for governor on the Republican ticket, and 1955, I believe, the year Happy Chandler won. And so I practiced law with the Republican nominee and the Democrat nominee, and have been in practice in Lexington ever since.
When you attended the law school, you started in 1957.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the relationship amongst the other law students? Was it a close-knit group, or were you working 2 jobs and were just there studying and got out?
No, that was close. 46 started in 1957. Of that 46, 16 graduated. And I apologize, but I've got a picture of, in front of Lafferty Hall, of all but one of those 16, 15. I should have brought it. I will probably make a copy and send it to you. And we were extremely close.
Was it a competitive in the classroom, or was it more relaxed and sort of everybody was on each other's side?
Every semester we'd lose about 3 or 4 people. Mm. And if you were close to the bottom like I was, they were always nipping at your heels. 3 or 4 would lose, 3 or 4. Fact is, my senior year in law school, a guy flunked out. It's easy to get in. Got in with 90.5 hours. But it was hard to stay there once you got there. My problem was that school was always easy for me. I didn't have to study too hard. Always got B's, occasionally A. Came to law school, had no history of writing, and the essay finals, I didn't do too well. So Professor Richard Gillum worked with me one whole semester on writing, and my grades improved a whole letter. And he was so kind. His name was Whiskey Dick. Called him Whiskey Dick Gillum. And he would, when the law students would have parties, he was always there. He could drink anybody under the table. And they told him, and it's true, when he was drinking and go home, he filled the bathtub with hot water, and he had a rest where he could hang his head, and he'd go to sleep. And when the water would cool off, it'd wake him up, and he'd be alert as if he had never gotten drunk. And Back then, we had Saturday classes. Do you still have Saturday classes?
No.
Oh, an 8 o'clock Saturday class after a party was not fully attended by everybody. And he would be teaching, and to about a half a classroom, and everybody would be about half asleep, still hungover, and let me put it this way, we were still young enough, we were learning how to drink, and some of us didn't handle it as well as others.
So what was the class schedule like? How many days were you? 6 days a week then? Or?
6 days a week. We always had Saturday classes, and we'd have maybe not more than 2 classes a day. And occasionally we would have a day with no classes. Do you want some stories now about some of the students?
Sure, if you're, yeah. If you,
Okay. Governor John Y. Brown Jr. was a sophomore when I started law school, and he's a sophomore when I graduated. He was reportedly, and probably true, he ran an encyclopedia salesman group, and it was reported he made $25,000 a year like that, but he lost $40,000 gambling. And one of my great stories, we had Professor Duke Manier, you might have heard of him, taught a class in future interest. So we started the exam at 8 o'clock, and about 8:20, John Y. entered. He a casual student, took maybe 1 or 2 classes a semester. He came in and everybody looked up and laughed because it's typical John Y. He sat down and first thing his hand up and said, "Professor Duke Manier." Says, "Yes, Mr. Brown." Says, "Everybody's got their books." He said, "Well, that's because it's an open book exam." And we just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And about 10 minutes, his hand went up and says, Mr. Duke Manier says, "Mr. Brown," says, "can I borrow your book?" That was typical John Y. He would come in the night before an exam. I'd be working for Miss Salmon in the library, and he'd wander in at 10:30, 11 o'clock. We got an exam 8 o'clock the next morning, and he'd look around and he'd get a book, wander off, and he'd always write a C. I guess even a C student can become governor of Kentucky.
So that professor, you kind of have a memory of his relationship as a student. Were there other professors that really, and you mentioned Gillum and his taking time to work with you. Were there other sort of professors that stood out in your kind of memory? Roy Moreland taught criminal law. There was
Oberst taught
Paul
constitutional
Oberst, yeah.
law. Dean Matthews taught property 1 and 2. Professor Ham taught contracts. There's a professor that taught taxation. Can't remember his name. My memory is not as good as it used to be.
I have a list of the professors at the time. What I'll do is maybe see if any of them ring a. There was a Frederick Whiteside.
That's who it was, Frederick Whiteside.
Yeah. He and Paul Oberus, their picture is up in the faculty lounge. We have a nice photo of the two of them up there. There was looks like Richard Gillum you mentioned, and it's Jesse, and is it Duke? How did you Duke of Mine?
Duke Manier.
Duke Manier.
Duke Manier, the Mississippi queer with the Ivy League veneer.
How did it go again? Say it again.
The Mississippi queer with the Ivy League veneer.
There you have it. His father, if I'm not mistaken, was very famous in the legal profession.
Don't know anything about him.
Really? Because it's such an uncommon name, and there's a very famous trust and estate book that's written by Jesse Duke Manier. That's not the junior. I think it was his father who wrote it. So, and then there's Bert Ham, Tom Lewis.
Tom Lewis, my first day in law school, he was there. I never did have a class under him, but I looked around. I wore a suit. Going to law school, I had no idea what to expect. I had a white shirt and tie, and I was the only one I could. I sat next to a guy with an old army overcoat, and hair sticking up. And I said, that fella won't make it. Well, he did make it. He's about third in our class, and had a wonderful career practicing law in Washington, D.C. One of my more famous memories of law school, we used to sit on the front porch and had about 2 or 3 steps, sidewalk leading up to it, and we would pitch pennies at a line that they had in the sidewalk, and the closest one to it would get all the pennies. And in 1959, we pitched pennies with Bobby Kennedy, who was there to make a speech, and he had to borrow some pennies to pitch with us.
Did he tell any good stories?
Who, Bobby?
Bobby.
No, he was quiet. Which leads to one of my more famous memories. It was wintertime, and we had one old great big gawky kid, I can't remember his name, and the football team, it was snowing, and the football team, 20 or 30 of them, were yelling and screaming and going en masse around the campus. So we decided to throw snowballs at them and then lock the door where they couldn't get to us. And we looked at each other without saying anything. We knew what we were going to do. We told them, says, you go out there and we'll let you throw the first snowball. So he went out on the porch, got ahead. We backed off into the building. He threw that snowball and screamed at him, says, take that, you son of a bitches. And we locked the door where he couldn't get in. Pounded on the door, said, God damn it, let me in, let me in. And then he took off running. And about 10 minutes, he's pounding on the door, please let me in, please let me in. And he'd run, and the football team chased him all over that campus. The tricks we'd play were not so funny sometimes.
Now, how was the behavior in the classroom itself when you all were in lectures? Did everybody, I assume there was Were there any sort of hijinks or sort of jokes or things that you all passed amongst each other?
No, I don't remember that. It was quiet. We had fellas that would take down and write, keep notes, head down, would not participate. Others would sit with eyes glazed over. We would participate because they called on you. Give that case. And everybody had series of the cases from you could buy from Chicago or someplace in Detroit, and they would be it'd have the case briefed. I think it was Forest Cool, if I'm not mistaken, and we'd get together every semester and write off and get the cases, but they were not well briefed. The question, they give the facts and answer the question and discuss it. The question was, is there a contract? Well, that's no help. But it saved you some writing sometimes.
Was there any one of the faculty members who was particularly good in their lectures?
Ham very seldom asked questions. Oberst would, and he was pretty good at dissecting a case.
Was there a subject that you liked the most?
Well, I liked the criminal law. And the constitutional law, I guess, was my two favorite subjects.
So when Roy Moreland I think that he was the criminal law teacher at the time.
Yeah, quite a character.
That's what I've heard. He had a small book that he wrote, correct, on homicide?
Yeah.
Did he teach from that book, I assume?
Yeah, and you had to buy it too.
What were some of the sort of kind of bizarre character moments about him?
Well, he'd come to class with mismatched socks. He had a big belly hanging out, and not buttoned. A tie that was as old as a law school. And if I remember anything about him, was his ranting and raving. And very seldom would anybody challenge him, because it was understood that when you're given a number and on your test, and the teacher didn't know who it was, he knew. He exactly knew. And it was wise not to cross him. And that was the most challenging moments, was when they post your grades on the bulletin board. And that was, your heart would stop. Your heart would exactly stop when you went on the bulletin board and read your grades. And
now that bulletin board, did they have your name or did they have your number?
Number.
They had your number, but did a bunch of people know who?
Who?
Did the other students know who the other number? No,
No.
but you would go and look for your number.
Yeah. Very little talking. Occasionally it would be, oh shit, or that goddamn son of a bitch did it to me, or how could I just made a C? I wrote a B paper. Comments like that.
Yeah. Did Roy Moylan ever talk about his World War I service in class?
Yes,
Wow.
and I don't know exactly what he did. I don't know. I think he was overseas, if I remember correctly. Professor Gillum had been in World War II, and I don't know whether he's in World War I or not.
Did you think that they were fair with their grading, or were you just sort of like, meh?
Oh, I got the grades that I deserved. I didn't deserve better grades. Best grade I made was in civil practice, where they had a mock trial, and I did better at that because I'm really a ham bone. And if I'm famous or noted for a trial in Kentucky, it's the Francis Jones Mills trial. She was the state treasurer, and in Kentucky, as you know, we elect the state treasurer and the attorney general and the auditor, commissioner of agriculture. She was indicted. The first, and as far as I know, the only state officer ever to be indicted.
When was this?
1985,
Ballpark.
1985. And so I represented her and the deputy. It was televised daily, and it was a 6-week trial. Jury was out 4.5 days. And if you know how tired you are after a 1-day trial, if you ever had a 2-day trial, you're completely exhausted. Do it for 6 weeks sometime. Trial was in Frankfurt, and I lived here in Lexington. And I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and prepare to drive to Frankfurt. And it's end of the day, I'd come back and do more preparation. I tried to get to bed by 11. And it wore me out like anything. I work construction work in the summertime. But I won the case the very first words out of my mouth. Had a full courtroom. Because it was a noteworthy trial. She was indicted on 38 counts of misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. And so we were given our opening statements. courtroom was filled. The jury box faced the judge. The judge was up in an alcove. It had double doors behind the judge. It's an old courtroom. So he said, Mr. Rather, I get up. About that time, the doors opened up behind the judge and two old women came out. Said, is this the clerk's office? Well, you can imagine how they did to your concentration. And he got up and talked to him, told him where to go. Sit down, said, Mr. Rather, I wait a good 30 seconds. Nobody's saying anything. Everybody's. I finally turned around to the judge and said, Judge, I forgot where I was at. Well, it broke up the jury, broke up the whole courtroom. Everybody laughed, pounded their knees. It's the funniest thing they've ever heard. But a laughing jury won't convict. A laughing jury won't convict. So I always say that I won the case on the very first words out of my mouth.
That's good.
But it also showed what a moral coward I was. And I regretted it in a way. It showed I was a moral coward. Frances Jones Mills got in trouble because she's using her employees in her campaigns and taking them out for work and making them do campaign work. And I'm smoking a cigarette at lunchtime. Everybody's going into the courtroom. And I look up, and there's the Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court with his little John Scott, the clerk of the Supreme Court, trotting along behind him with an armload of campaign posters. He's campaigning. And I said, God damn, I'll win this case. I'll get a summons and have his ass in court. So I went running and got to the clerk's office and stopped. My legs wouldn't move. Do I really want to summons the Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court? Do I? And my legs tremble, and I just couldn't make myself do it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't make myself do it. And he was a personal friend of mine. John Scott was a personal friend. And a stronger person than me would have got a summons. Of course, to prove that everybody in Frankfort was doing what Frances Jones Mills was doing, I got a summons for the Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, the Auditor, all the public officials. And they came to court screaming and yelling and carrying on, but they worked the court pretty good and didn't have to testify. But I always wondered what would have happened if I had done it.
I'm going to go back to when you were working at the law school for the library. About how big was the library? Because I just have no sense of that building.
Well, the library itself was about the size of this office floor plan, back to the way you entered in both sides. That was about the size of where you studied, and had volumes along the walls. Back behind, they had stacks, maybe 5 or 6 stacks. Wasn't the biggest law library. Had some additional stacks. And Of course, I had the key to the library, you know. I worked there. And it would open on Sunday afternoon at 1. But there's people that loved to study all the time. So they came to me, since I had the key, and wanted to go Sunday morning. But she said, yes. I was a big man. I had the key.
Yeah.
And I let them in, and that went on for a couple of months. So one Sunday, I opened the door, and the lights are off, and I was going back through the stacks, and an arm came out and grabbed me and said, Mr. Rather. There's Dorothy Salmon. Turned us into Dean Matthews. Turned me into Dean Matthews. And met with him, and he could hardly keep a grin off his face. What can you say about students that so interested want to study on Sunday morning? And he said, you're going to have to stop it. And he sort of grinned. He shook his head and said, need to keep peace with everybody. And I'd appreciate it if you'd stop it. So that stopped it. But my heart stopped and that arm come out. That Mr. Rather. She had a low voice.
And what was your job? What did she hire you to do? Just work the desk at night, or
Worked the desk. We had a little desk between the big room and the stacks. And if they wanted a book, they'd come tell you and you'd go get it. And I worked one summer, and I forgot what I did, but I worked all summer, worked all day, and got paid for it. I think she told me she had a budget, and she needed to spend, not turn a penny back on the budget, because next year's budget would be a little bit more. You know how that works, I
do.
suppose.
Yeah.
And worked at the same time I was working the faculty club.
So the faculty club was a dining room?
It was in a big house next to Lafferty Hall. And the faculty club it turned the living room into a dining room. They didn't have a big crowd that ate there. Food was terrible. And it would be 3 or 4 students that would wait on tables. And as running the faculty club, I got to choose who got to eat. And nobody had any money. It was a prized position. And they had a pool table upstairs. And they had a bedroom I slept in. And occasionally we'd play pool.
Now, did the faculty members at the law school eat there?
I don't remember them ever doing that.
So those faculty members from other departments would come there?
From the whole university.
I wonder where the law faculty went. Just ate at their desks, maybe?
Maybe there at the student union building. Had a cafeteria. My first year in law school, I lived on Maxwellton Court, up by the College of the Bible, and had 2 fellows that worked at the student union building, and they'd come back every night with their pockets full of fried chicken, biscuits, milk, and we'd put the milk outside the window to keep it cold. And they got a little bit too rambunctious, started stealing more and more food. They finally got fired. If nothing else, because of the greasy pockets. And
So those were your roommates in law school?
yeah, my room cost, first room cost $12 a month. My senior year, I lived in an attic. I was working 3 jobs, and you couldn't stand up straight in it. And I was forever forgetting that, but jumping up and bam, knocking my ass off. In the wintertime, that depended on them keeping the door open up to the attic so I could get some heat. Otherwise, I'd freeze my ass off. And they had one guy, John Collis, a law student, forever shut that door. Finally, I lost my temper, and grabbed him and put him up against the wall, and told him I was going to kill him if he shut that door again. And I meant it. I meant it. And he knew I meant it. And John Collis later was a famous disbarment. He was disbarred. And he finally sued the members of the old Court of Appeals. I don't know. I was president of the local bar association. And he got out that he's going to sue me too. So he must have remembered that incident, because I sent word back to him. He sued me. I'd wound up breaking both his arms and both his legs. And I meant it. So he didn't sue me. But he's the first disbarment. Back then, the local bar association would basically initiate disbarment procedure.
In essence, you took care of your own in a way.
It took care of our own.
And so
we knew when a good guy made a mistake and knew the bad ones.
Yeah. So what was he disbarred for?
I don't know how he did it, but he'd get some poor people in and charge them $7,500 for something and never do it. He's forever charging and getting money. Yeah, I can't hardly get $150 for a divorce case. And here he's getting $7,500 for it. I don't know how he could do it. And he had all these cases when he was finally disbarred. And the cases, Bar Association and the court, or local court, or judges on the circuit court, decided that we would get volunteers to take over the cases and finish them at no cost. And I was sort of in charge of getting, the court would say we need 2 lawyers and these are the cases. Well, I'd call around and convince them lawyers to take the case and finish it up. And we finished up 50 or 60 cases that way. It's earned me a Henry T. Duncan Award that year. Plaque on the wall.
So, could you, as far as the classmates that you were with, you had mentioned the sort of John Y. Brown story of him sort of just coming to that test and that sort of, were there classmates of yours that were really impressive to you? That always just wowed you with how amazing they were?
Well, John Bondurant was their number one student. He made all A's. I understand he finally made a B, and he and his brother and his daddy came to talk to the professor that gave him a B. And
That sort of thing still kind of happens.
yeah. Impressive is not the right word with my students that I was with. I really loved them all, and I think they all loved each other. We were very close. I should have brought that picture of maybe you don't want it.
Oh, I would love to see that, yeah.
We all went out and bought us a bowler. We had the bowler hat. And we turned out a pretty good class. We turned out the federal judge, Henry Wilhoit. Charles English was the leader in the Bar Association, president of the Bar Association. His son was president. A district court judge. Several circuit court judges.
Did it at the kind of end of it all? Do you remember the graduation program?
Yes, because I only had one pair of clean socks. They were red. And my pants were short. And I was probably the only graduate that you could really see the red socks going up there and get my. But I'm so happy to graduate. And back then, you took the exam in the old, well, not the old, the House of Representatives. 3 days of essay questions. They didn't have air conditioning. It was done in July. Hot. People would tie handkerchiefs around their head to keep the sweat from messing up your papers and everything. And the announcements were reserved. Results were announced in September. And but they always came out in a Courier Journal. And I was living in Bowling Green. The truck from Louisville brought the papers to Bowling Green, would arrive at 4 o'clock. Well, I was down there waiting for the truck. And for 3 or 4 days, my hand was shaking so hard when I raised up the paper and I saw my name. I went home woke up my mother. And both of us cried. Maybe my emotions are getting too much for me. But I stayed in school when probably I shouldn't have. No money. But I was determined that someday my picture would go up on the plaque that said Class of 1960. And I did. Because I was not a sort of below an average student.
So, the you found the results from the bar, and did you start practice there on Bowling Green, or did you move
I started as a law clerk on the local Court of Appeals.
On the Court of Appeals, which at the time was the Supreme Court of Kentucky.
Yes.
Yeah, which is now,
Now
it was the highest court. Of,
highest court.
And so you clerked for 1 year.
1 year. And then there was a vacancy. Wendell Ford was in the Governor Combs' office, and he was going to go back to Owensboro and start his political career. They moved Ed Fawcett into his job, but left the vacancy for legal assistant. Back then, Governor Combs only had up there's a picture with me with Governor Combs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was only had a staff of 6 guys. Ed Easterly in there, and the Court of Appeals, which Combs had been on before he became governor, recommended me, and I don't know why they did, but they did. And so I went down and talked to him, and about a week he called me back. And he talked with a mountain twang. I don't know if you've ever heard Governor Combs make a speech or no.
No, I haven't heard, no.
Okay. I went down and he says, well, we'll try it. If you don't like it, you tell me. And if I don't like it, I'll tell you. And back then, on the Court of Appeals, I was only making $396 a month. The secretaries made $400. And so I started off at $7,500 a year. Well, there was more money than God made. And finally, when I left, I was making $10,000 a year. More money than anything.
How did you view the legal profession? I would like to hear about your vision of the legal profession when you were in law school, and then how it sort of evolved over time. Did you have a certain vision of what lawyers were like when you were in law school, and then sort of how did that align with reality?
Well, you thought of the legal profession when you're in law school as sort of gods. They had made it. They were pillars of the community. And first started practicing soon found out that they drank, they chased women, caught them too often, got caught too often, and got a taste of reality. Soon decided that which ones in the bar were old farts. And should have quit practicing years ago. Which were good lawyers and which were bad ones. Which ones you wondered how they ever got through law school. And some of them to this day I wonder, how in the hell did he ever get out of law school? And
What you'd mentioned the parties that you all used to go to in law school, sort of, and you'd mentioned with Whiskey Dick Gillum.
yeah.
Where were the parties held? Who would throw them?
There were two legal fraternities. I forget what their names were.
Did they have houses on campus?
No, they didn't have houses. They were honorary memberships.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of them would throw a party at the beginning of the year. And maybe one other before the year was over. And we'd go out to a bar or, well, to bars, really. Couldn't think of it. And they would turn into drunken brawls. Pretty bad. I remember one, they just figured they could do anything. And I remember once, there was a group of 5 or 6 in there talking. All of a sudden they spread because one of them had unzipped his pants, took his pecker out, and was pissing on the floor. And as soon as he's through, he zipped himself up, and the crowd would come back again. And they would be, there never was a fight, but there would be a lot of people there with dates. So we started dancing, and they took umbrage, and there was always words, but no fights.
So what would be so that's a couple of times a year you'd have those parties. Did you all have any sort of regular Friday night or Saturday night place that you all would all go to, where a couple of you would go to sort of drink and relax and kick in?
No, because nobody had any money, and I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I didn't have money for
Running around
liquor.
and acting a fool. Yeah.
liquor. I didn't have any money for beer. I didn't have the money for a date. Although I was a houseboy and met this girl and wanted to date her, but the houseboys couldn't date, so I quit. I wound up marrying her. And we didn't go out. We didn't date. We didn't see a movie. We sit around her sorority house. That's all I could afford. I really didn't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was envious of the ones that did, but I don't remember them going out, you know. Friday night we'd still be at the law school. Football games, I helped sell programs. I could make $12, $14, and $12, $14 was a ton of money for me. Ton of money. Everybody in the house that I lived in, once a week, would take our clothes to Andy's Wee Wash. And they had a sack they gave everybody, and you could take a sack over and get it done for $1. Well, we would spend 2 hours cramming clothes into that sack, and if there was a crease in it, that meant that it wasn't full, and we would cram more clothes in. And I got maybe one haircut a year. Didn't have any money. I would love to have gone through school and had an apartment and a car, but probably they would have flunked out.
Yeah, the distractions of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it. I was sitting down behind the courthouse. I'm on a cane now, probably being a walker before the year's out. I'm on a walker most of the time. But anyway, I was sitting down behind the courthouse and had a young lawyer, and I got to talking to him. And I was curious. I said, "How much do you owe?" And you know, if law school says $100,000, and I can't believe it, $100,000 that they spend, that they get. And they only take about the top 10 or 12, and the rest of them can't pay that back. But they all have an apartment, they've got a car, they go out on Friday and Saturday nights, eat out. Of course they're gonna owe $100,000.
Yeah, I think some people's relationship with finances are sort of not in sync with reality.
Well,
sometimes.
No, it's not reality. They don't sit down and say, "How much am I going to earn when I graduate?" I wouldn't go back to law school. I couldn't pass a bar exam today. I couldn't pass a bar exam. But I think I'd be a teacher.
What kind of I think we're about near the kind of end. I just wanted to wrap up with, a question about what you think the College of Law sort of has meant for you over your years in your practice, and also what the College of Law has sort of meant for the community.
Well, it's meant everything for me. It's meant, I worked one summer construction, running a Georgia buggy that's a wheelbarrow. And at the end of the summer, I saved $18. It only paid 75 cents an hour. I don't know if it paid that much. But in law school, the jobs I had only paid 50 cents an hour. But it meant everything to me. It meant my life. When you get to thinking of my life of ease, because the only thing I'm exercising is my mind. But I think we've got probably in Kentucky one law school too many. But that's Louis Nunn's fault, establishing northern Kentucky when we didn't need it. But we've got a circuit judge here in Lexington that drove back and forth, graduated. Used to practice in this office, Tom Clark. What it means to the community, I don't think the community knows the law school's there. It's not influential in the community because none of the professors will step out and take a case that affects the community. And that's, to me, the only way that you're going to affect the community is to establish a precedent, take a murder case for the defendant. So I really don't. You can wipe UK law school off the map, and the people wouldn't miss it. Maybe harsh terms, but that's what I think.
So you think that there should just one way to improve that, if we decide that that's a priority, is to be engaged in that manner, and doing occasional practice.
Yeah, because the professors are teaching students. Students go out, practice, and then become maybe professors. But that doesn't have any influence in the communities. A classroom of 50 students is not affecting the community.
Right. Well, I wanted to know if there's anything else that you would like to add before we come to a close.
Oh, I had a great time in law school. Maybe I'm affected by how poor I was when I went to law school, and I don't mean to beat on that. You school and wondering where the next dollar's coming from, and all your friends are getting married and happy and having babies and got jobs and making money, and you're not. But that affected me as I reflect back, probably more than it should have, because I can't get over it. I just can't get over it.
Yeah. Well, with that, I will end our recording.